Coming up on AI Haven't a Clue, AI is changing travel.
The holiday of the future will be much more personalised and much more relaxing.
AI is creating video games in real time. It was bizarre. It was utterly bizarre.
You can still do that. This is not illegal.
We're chatting intellectual property with our guest, Carl Rosen.
Who can be an author? Who can be an inventor? Does that need to be a human? What does it mean when a machine has generated something of novelty?
And we're taking on one of your burning questions. I think James has got away with one this week. Hello and welcome to AI Haven't a Clue. It's the podcast where we just try and understand this big old and slightly crazy world of AI. I'm George Butler.
And I'm James Chandler.
Wait, hold on a minute. That's not James Chandler. That's not James. That's not James Chandler.
It's not James Chandler, actually. It's Phil Rowley just doing a James Chandler impression.
Phil, hello. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, mate. How are you?
For Phil. James will be livid because he never gets a round of applause. James is on holiday this week, taking a much-deserved break. And Phil, you very kindly stepped in as our guest host this week.
Thank you. That's very nice of you. I mean, I must say, I was a bit annoyed that you stipulated that his replacement must be someone equally bald, but... I'm happy to fulfill that role.
It was in James's contract. We had no choice. Phil, if you missed the episode where Phil joined us just last week, it was such a brilliant listen. We had to get you back. You are going to be our resident AI expert today. And you know your stuff about AI. Could you tell everybody a little bit about what you do, because you're immersed in this world?
Yeah, thanks. So I am head of futures at Omnicom Media Group. So I'm essentially a media futurist. So I talk about what's coming next in TV and radio and digital and gaming, but also naturally AI is going to be like a stick of rock cut through all of those media channels and mean that we're going to see an incredible advancement in the way that technology alters the way we consume media over the next few decades. And I'm all about that, George.
It's changing at such pace. I mean, that's something I'd love to know, actually, because of the pace of how everything is changing. It genuinely does seem like 1 month after another, things are completely different. That must make your job very interesting, but be quite challenging right now.
Absolutely. I mean, some of the proclamations I'm about to make might be out of date by the end of this podcast, to be quite frank. I'm not sure, because I think that we have a tendency within our industry and within business to perhaps be excited by the fireworks. The fireworks go bang, boom, and we go, ooh, ah, and then they're gone. What I think that we should be looking for are the deeper, more macro trends, which are probably, if trends are like a firework, we should be looking for the equivalent of the aurora borealis, something which is higher altitude and is much more tectonic and moves and evolves over time. I think that's where the learning is. There's always going to be spikes to our interest and the things that we want to talk about, and this podcast is a brilliant example of that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there are also longer term trends unfolding over decades, and they're the ones we can also pay attention to.
Well, talking of trends, in a little bit, we're going to be hearing about a new travel and AI report that you have been working on.
Yeah.
We're also going to be talking about movies, and we've got a big AI question for you this week, which is all about Google's new AI search. But before we get into all of that, let's take a look at what's going on in the news in the world of AI this week. And we're going to start with OpenAI. We're talking a lot about them at the moment on the podcast, but they have launched 2 new open weight AI models. Phil, what on earth does that mean?
It is obviously quite a technical term. The best way I can explain it from my point of view is it's just further evidence of democratization of technology. Okay, so, when you go back to technologies that we've experienced over the last few decades, there's always a version which industry becomes obsessed with initially, and then slowly as the price comes down and the utility and the accessibility increases, the everyday person, the general public, starts getting their hands on it and learning how to use it. So computing, for instance, once upon a time, computer programming was the preserve of people who were experts at MIT and Bell Laboratories and Bell Labs. And, by 1982, I was programming my Acorn Electron in my bedroom. And then obviously in the 90s, there were camcorders, which became affordable. All of a sudden, Dad was Cecil B. DeMille and Steven Spielberg. In 2000, there were bloggers, and everybody decided that they were citizen journalists, and then social media and influencers, and everybody's a TV presenter. And I think that what this open AI news is essentially just an opening of the ability for people to create their own artificial intelligence programs. It's like the building bricks or the Minecraft of AI, if you like, where people can now take on those elements, drag and drop, and sandbox it all together to create AIs that will do something that they want that AI to do.
So ChatGPT is a closed AI. So obviously you have to work within the remits of ChatGPT. So OpenAI, who are obviously behind ChatGPT, are opening up their tech. Anyone can go in and use its full power. What does it mean for the average person? Like, what will I be able to do with this open version that I couldn't do with ChatGPT?
I think initially, without a real effort to engage with the way that it works, probably not very much. I think you would probably have to upskill and learn how this works. It's a little bit like Photoshop becoming available to anybody. You've still got to go through not a lengthy process, but certainly a dedicated process of understanding the tool, working out what it wants, and then working out, ultimately what you want to do with it. But the use cases, because it's a sandbox, could be absolutely anything. You could build a chatbot which answers very specific queries on a very specific topic if you so wished. But I suppose that the limit really is your imagination in terms of, what tasks that you want to point it at.
I know that Google have done something same, opening up their AI tools. I know China with DeepSeek as well. Why are these tech giants doing this? Why are they opening up the power and capabilities of their AI to everybody?
I think that Sam Altman and Zuckerberg have proclaimed a desire to put these tools in the hands of everyday people, because it's almost like the world's biggest crowdsourcing experiment. The only limit, I suppose, is people's imagination and people's dedication to learning the tools and applying them in the right way to come up with a myriad of solutions and a myriad of applications. I think they think that this is just a giant petri dish and a giant experiment to find the best of the best, naturally, really intelligent, clever uses of the sandbox, so to speak, will surface. And I think that's what they're hoping.
So I guess we will just watch this space with how people use this open-ended AI tool. And talking of being creative with AI, Google have launched Genie 3. That's their latest kind of AI model. And they're opening up the world of video games.
Yeah, so I think that democratization argument moves across to the world of gaming as well. I think what's interesting about the Genie model is that this is part and parcel of an overall process of a move from digitization to dimensionalization. So in the 2000s, you've got all your media, like your images, your music, your video, and they became digitized and uploaded onto the internet as YouTube. And remember Napster as well, and Flickr. And then in the 2020s, I think that we will see objects and people and places and interactive navigable environments become dimensionalized. So that volumetric scanning is going to be something which ultimately becomes much more commonplace, the idea that we can navigate through depth. And that's not necessarily something new. We've always had dioramas, we've always had scale models, we've always had representations of media in 3 dimensions. Gaming has always been really good at that, at representing things in 3 dimensions. And gaming has always been really good at personifying an other version of you, a sort of, a pixelated character that you can control, and you put those things together, and that's why gaming has been on the increase for 40 years. This latest development just makes that so much more easy. It's bringing AI and bringing that kind of dimensionalized approach, thanks to Google DeepMind, and you're going to be able to construct environments very, very quickly. You're going to be interact for longer, and it's also going to have brilliant memory. So when you build a level or create some kind of environment, it will remember elements of that labyrinth, if you like, so that you can return to sections and continue to essentially wander around an environment that you have created, understand 3-dimensionality of the world you have created, and it retain the memory of the way and the desire that you brought to construct it.
The possibilities that AI is allowing, I'm going to say normal people, but creative people, giving them the tools to be creative. And the one thing I have learned, I would say, with doing this podcast is that with a lot of these big AI things, there's some amazing use studies and equally with a lot of AI tech, there is also a lot of disastrous uses. And I don't know if you saw, Rod Stewart this week has been making headlines in his concert. He's been using an AI version of Ozzy Osbourne, right?
Correct. Yes, he has.
I have to say, I saw it on TikTok and it was one of the weirdest things I have ever seen. So if you haven't yet seen it, there is an AI generated version of Ozzy who is basically in heaven alongside some other alumni of past music artists. We're talking Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, we're talking Freddie Mercury, Amy Winehouse, Prince, and Tupac. What did you make of this, Phil?
I think it's interesting because, you know how at the end of the Oscars, they sometimes show a long procession of people who've passed that year, and there's a lot of love and there's a lot of applause. This is considered to be tasteful and respectful, okay? Equally, if Rod Stewart at his concert had kind of created a montage of people who'd passed that year, including Ozzy, and shown it maybe in the Oscars style, perhaps it wouldn't have had the reaction. But there's something about the fact that they use Gen AI to animate these long-deceased artists that has really rankled the public. There's something about crossing a taste boundary there that has meant that this has achieved a certain amount of popularity stroke notoriety. And I'd also say, you mentioned TikTok, I think if this had not been done in the era of social media and it had just been at a series of concerts, then people wouldn't have batted an eyelid. It's something about the virality. And don't forget, the majority of the people that are commenting on it from a virality point of view and from a social media point of view weren't at that concert and didn't view it in context. However, one of the things that I have noticed and one of the things that I've seen in the commentary is that actually there's a real split in age between those that denigrate it and those that say everybody's too sensitive. It was just meant in a really kind of heartfelt and genuine and honest way. And it's an age split. It seems as if people who are on the younger end of the spectrum are the ones that are turned off by it and find it, sort of trite and distasteful and misjudged. Whereas it's the older generation, perhaps the kind of people that do go to a Rod Stewart concert that are less bothered by it because they think that it's a kind of a fitting tribute. And I think that's a really interesting split.
It was fascinating because for me, I don't think it's a horrible thing to be doing. I don't think it's it's clearly has its heart in the right place. It was just the weirdness of it. It was the way that Ozzy was taking a selfie with Tupac. If Ozzy and an alive Tupac took a selfie together, it would be strange. Watching them in a quite a cartoonish, but also attempting to be real, Gen AI animation, it was bizarre. It was utterly bizarre.
It was bizarre. There's the other issue, I think, is the fact that there is an element of permission here and the act of taking liberties in some cases. So we know that Prince, for instance, apparently was very, very fiercely protective of his image. So I'm not sure what he would have thought of this, but then that's a bit of a strange question to ask because he's not here to complain about it. But Tupac's stepbrother was perfectly okay with it. So there's also this element, are you essentially taking the image of somebody and using it in a way that they would have A, approved of, or B, not approved of? And we can never know because they are no longer with us, which is the point of the video in the first place. So it's a really interesting debate and it's emblematic, I think, of where we go with generative AI, and it's sparking the right kinds of conversation, and we're having those right now.
I mean, it's interesting. If you haven't yet seen it, do give it a look. Talking of interesting uses of AI, I was fascinated when I read this story. So Disney are making a live-action version of their hit animated series, Moana. Dwayne Johnson, who voices Maui in the animated series, is playing Maui in this version of the film. But Disney plan to use AI technology for this Moana remake with Dwayne Johnson. What's the story here?
So yeah, it's an interesting contrast with what we're talking about with the Ozzy story. This was about using Gen AI purposefully and with all permissions in order to complete a piece of creative endeavour. Whereas Ozzy's issue is about taste. This is more about maybe a legal uncertainty around what it would mean to start using digital twins. I think it's an interesting debate because I'm going to list some films for you that have previously, throughout history, industry used what I would call artifice or manipulation or some form of special effects to bring somebody to the screen that wasn't there at the time. I mean, Superman Returns featured in when was that? 2006 featured a deceased Marlon Brando. Gladiator featured a deceased Oliver Reed. Rogue One brought back Grand Moff Tarkin, Peter Cushing, again with full permission. Even before then, before computers, there was things like Roy Kinnear, who died on the set of the Three Musketeers, was replaced by a lookalike actor, and they shot him from the back. Right. So there are many examples of there needing to be some form of reconstruction of an artist or an actor that wasn't there on set. But we now have reached such a point with artificial intelligence that I think that it starts moving into this idea of what happens after the filming is finished, and whether because you have those digital assets that they can be used again. And so the legal structures, there needs to be some kind of conversation and some precedent about what happens to the ownership of a digital twin or a clone post-filming. And that's where we are in the discussion right now.
It's interesting, isn't it? And this was all because, they were worried about Dwayne Johnson's schedule. And it's incredible, though, to think that you could take big acting brands, be it Jennifer Lawrence, Tom Cruise, or Dwayne Johnson, and have them star in a film that they weren't even on set for.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another extension of the fantastic special effects industry and the way that it is, allowing films to be delivered in the most creative and unique manner. And I'm sure that this will all ultimately be, find its own level. There will be structures in place and there will be precedents and ways of working that will be ironed out. Goodness me, it's Disney, for goodness sake, right? So, they are at the forefront of what they do. A storied company with incredible history. If anyone can sort it out, I think they can. This is so early in this process, the idea of digital twins and assets which can be used afterwards. We probably will see them come up with some really watertight solutions that will be modelled for the rest of the industries. I'm confident in future there will be structures and frameworks in place that will become industry standards.
Given the topic of this podcast, we should probably add Back to the Future 2 to your list, with Crispin Glover never actually filming anything for the sequel of that film.
That's right. He hung upside down and used a lookalike actor with some prosthetic on, I remember, yeah.
So talking of films, last week we were talking about a bit of AI tech which is coming into place, which will essentially give production companies the chance to change the endings to some of their films. This might even be without the consent of the directors. And we asked the question, if you could change the ending of a film using AI, what film would you change? So let's go through a few of the answers that have come in. CJ said Game of Thrones season 7 and 8. We had George say maybe the Thanos snap could have stuck and put the MCU out of its misery. We've had a few Star Wars ones in there as well. Moses, however, said this is so anti-art. He does not like it. Phil, though, if you could change the end to any film that existed using AI, what are you doing?
Well, I mentioned one of my favourite films is 2001: A Space Odyssey. And as much as I like Kubrick and as much as I adore that film, the ending is a massive turn-off for a lot of people because nobody really understands what's happened. It's an extremely psychedelic, confusing ending where people are often left none the wiser. And I know that was Kubrick's intention because occasionally he was very arch and left films open-ended. But I know from reading the book that Arthur C. Clarke wrote a definitive ending that was not represented in the film. I would deign to request that 2001 had an ending that was more accessible and that people could actually understand, which would make the rest of the film so much more rewarding if you actually took the message from the final frames.
Okay, good answer. And ultimately, I feel like AI is taking us into this world of deeper personalization for better or for worse. So it just might be that there is an ending that you want that no one else even has to ever see. It could just be something that you is yours and yours alone.
That is true, but I also think that I think many directors would be unhappy with the idea of their films being tampered with. We the idea that a chef makes the dish in exactly with the right balance of herbs and spices to say this is I have authored this dish. This is the dish that I want you to taste in accordance with my skill set. I think if someone were to then just go and put a load of ketchup on it because they like ketchup, that would ruin the dish. And I think giving people the option to end a film in a different way could be their right, but it wouldn't necessarily make the film any better because it's not in keeping with the overall auteur's vision.
I mean, you could just imagine Christopher Nolan being delighted with you being able to find out what happens to that coin at the end of Inception. But I mean, I think it goes back to the whole thing that we are constantly talking about rights and IP, which we're going to come on to later in this podcast, and the haziness and the question marks which AI bring to that. And you're right, directors may not be happy, but perhaps they might not have a say in it going forward. It's going to be interesting to see where AI takes us in that space. So every week, Phil, I do ask James some of the cool things that he's been playing around with in the world of AI. And we were talking about films earlier. You did mention something quite interesting, a YouTube account. Can you tell us all?
Yeah, so if we're thinking about the way that modern special effects can improve with time and how the democratization of that technology means that we can now take footage and original footage and enhance it and augment it after it's filmed. There's a great account called The Corridor Crew on YouTube, which is essentially 5 or 6 special effects guys who have some high-tech software, but are effectively in their bedrooms or metaphorically in an extremely small room, and that take special effects from films that are maybe 10 or 15 or 20 years ago and improve them using the modern techniques at their disposal. So whilst it could be seen to be perhaps a little bit scornful of scenes that are not particularly effective by today's modern special effects standards, it's done very lovingly and with a certain amount of heart, and saying if we had another crack at this today with the techniques at our disposal, how would we improve this? And so there's some great examples of footage which you perhaps might raise an eyebrow if you watched it on television today and it was 15 years old, but if it was updated using those techniques, all of a sudden it looks like $1 million, because such is the way that the price has fallen on the ability to make almost anything appear on your screen with the click of a mouse.
Corridor Crew. We'll have to check that one out. Now, Phil, you have just released a brand new report about travel and how AI is having an impact across every stage of the travel industry. I mean, I guess to start with, what brought this report on? And we're going to go into the findings, but how has it been interesting? What's come out of it?
Yeah, I think our starting point was what's the holiday of the year 2035 going to be like when AI is integrated into all travel touch points. And that was very much the beginning of that journey. And so we went away and looked at some of the technologies and the companies and the platforms that exist in this space to see that how transport, tourism and travel might alter over the next decade.
What's been the big findings in the decade to come?
I think that we found 5 key evolutions. So the first one is refined recommendations. And we like the idea, or we fancy the idea, that holiday recommendations in the future will be much more customized, nuanced, and speaking to your actual tastes rather than the blunt categories of skiing holiday, beach holiday, and city break, that we might almost be able to playlist elements of a holiday. And so if you are interested in Brian Cox, the astronomer, and safari, that we can create a niche holiday that is essentially stargazing in Namibia, for instance. And we can start to get much more refined and atomized packaged holidays. That's the first thing. The second thing is personalized planning, the idea that AI, as a result of understanding those signals and your preferences, can start to construct those holidays automatically. It's our automated vacation creation. And the idea that it can act like a virtual travel agent and understand that, a taxi and a plane and a hotel and a tour and a restaurant booking, even though they are essentially disparate items on an itinerary, can be linked together and chained together in a package, if you like. The third thing is supercharged services. And we're talking about the idea of using AI as to augment the layer of customer service you receive when you are on your holidays. Everything from animated avatars at kiosks that can do live translation rather than and you stab the buttons on the Tokyo Underground and not really understand what ticket you're buying, all the way through to ambient intelligence, the idea that, I don't know if you've ever had the problem of being trying to work the aircon in a hotel that you don't understand, just stabbing it like, I just want it colder.
And it turns into a sauna.
Right, exactly.
All the time.
Just the ability to speak to your hotel room's appliances and say colder or turn off in 1 hour or change the channel. Just that layer of ease, that frictionlessness. The fourth one is optimized operations, which is this idea of AI being underneath everything that facilitates your travel, from queues. So understanding AI can eliminate long lines at theme parks. It can also use computer vision to monitor lines at airports in passport control and open new gates and open new lanes accordingly. And finally, maximized marketing, which is the idea that if you are a travel company or even a small cafe or restaurant in a resort, that again, you have democratized access to creativity that uses those signals, that deep understanding of preference and how they all overlap, everything from your music tastes to your food tastes to your online purchases, and start giving you messages and bringing you travel offers that actually are relevant. And those 5 elements, I think, will mean that the holiday of the future, I hope, will be frictionless and much more personalized and much more relaxing. Goodness me, we go on holiday and with all the best will in the world, with all the most incredible modern technologies that we have, you fly through the air to another country, and yet we still get stressed out by lost luggage and hotel room keys that we've lost and turning up late and not understanding the checkout procedure. And I would just like to see AI eliminate all of those pain points and those friction points that still exist today in 2025.
What I love about this is that sometimes AI is this kind of big, scary thing. And it's like, well, I get it. I understand it's changing the world, but like how and why? And this is a lovely example of ways in which it's going to impact our lives for the better. A few questions for you, Phil. Firstly, what about what would you say to the planners, the people that I like booking a holiday 10 months out and I like spending 6 months planning it. I like looking where my hotel should be. I love reading reviews about the restaurants that I should go to in the area. I love buying the tickets for all the things that I need to do. This might strip all of that away. What do you say to the people that live for the planning of their holidays?
You can still do that. This is not illegal. You are still allowed to scroll through travel websites. If you really want to, you can go and find a travel agent in your high street, if they still exist, and get some colour brochures off the wall. There's nothing to stop you from doing that. But the reality is, I think that if you wanted not to have to trawl through pages and pages of reviews and recommendations, then there is for the first time, the ability to start chaining those elements together in a more frictionless, automated fashion. And for you to, yes, tweak those elements and thumbs up and thumbs down if they don't fit your taste, because the algorithms will still be learning. But ultimately, if you want your time reduced, you can claim that right. And that's what AI affords us, that opportunity to make things quicker and slicker if you so choose.
What about when it comes to ads in this space? Because as you've just said, within literally a couple of inputs into an AI generator, you can have your whole holiday spat back at you and you go, lovely, click that button. How do we stop this future being completely taken over by brands without us realizing that they're feeding into this?
I think, and I hope, and I strongly believe that there will always be a requirement to make it known when an ad is different from an organic recommendation. And that's not any different from the way that our search engines deliver us organic recommendations and at the same time have paid for placements which are clearly marked as paid for placements. I don't see that given that there is a need to generate revenue for all tech companies, and advertising is one of the most common and accepted forms of revenue, that there will be any change. I certainly don't think there will be any nefarious intent to kind of slip us an ad without us noticing. There are so many ways of labeling when something has been paid for, including influencers now, which say contains paid placement. Television contains the same thing. I don't see, even though AI is involved, that there'll be any difference from that.
Phil, it's such an interesting report. Where can people find it if they want to read more?
Come to my LinkedIn, Phil Rowley, and you'll find it plastered all over my page.
Lovely. We'll share it on our sites too.
Thank you.
Now, so every week on the show, Phil, James is put to the test as our resident AI expert. And now, seeing as you are stepping into his shoes, you are not getting away without having to face this week's AI question, which is relevant. It taps into some of the stuff we've actually been talking about today. It comes from Becca. Thank you, Becca, for sending in this. Now that Google's AI features will change the way that we use search, how quickly and in what ways do you think advertisers will adapt to change the way that they advertise online? I think James has got away with one this week, being away. It's a tricky question, Becca, but it's really interesting, and it's something we have been talking about over the last few weeks. Phil, I mean, there's no clear answer here. It's a very live subject, but what's your thoughts?
So I think that in the short term, it just means that marketers and advertisers will need to be cognizant that a new skill set will need to be developed, and that is the understanding that AI is going to start delivering much more fulsome answers to specific search queries. However, as we've already stated, I still think that companies like Google will require, ad revenue, and that means that there will have to be the right mix of paid solutions and organic solutions. So I don't think that will actually change. If anything, AI will improve the relevance of ads anyway, as it understands much more about the nuance and the nexuses of our preferences anyway. I think in the short term, what brands should be thinking of is this concept of algorithmic availability. And that means that the information on websites and the information about products and services are visible and parsable, as in Parsable. The idea that an AI can scan and understand the offering so that it can surface some of those offerings within its answers, whether paid, and I still think that will be an option, or organic.
I mean, the interesting thing going forward is going to be, from a user point of view, when you are being fed an AI response, how do you know if a brand have paid to infiltrate the response? Because it's fine, as you say, it's part and parcel. We are used to it, but it needs to be clear, right? It needs, for ethical reasons, it needs to be clear that there is an ad that has been paid for. The information isn't just the real deal. It's part of a paid for partnership.
Absolutely, and I would probably pick you up on the word infiltrate, George, because that implies some kind of nefarious intent, and I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think that there are structures in place which means that there really needs to be a labelling when there's been a commercial arrangement, and I don't see any reason why that's going to change in the immediate term, or indeed the mid or long term. I think we will always need to see when something has been elevated through a commercial relationship versus a natural and organic answer. But I want to restate, that's no different to our search results now, our YouTube now, our television now. There'll always be some form of signal that we are now moving into a commercial territory and a commercial space.
Yeah, it is interesting though, because, the devil's advocate there will go, well, look, TV, you've got an ad break. It's an ad break. Whereas where things have been headed over the last few years, obviously with influencer marketing as well, it is a little bit more difficult for consumers, and it's going to be interesting to see where the next iteration of search takes us, because I don't think we're there yet, are we? But I think it will be. I just hope it's something which is regulated to levels which past media have been, but time will tell, right?
Absolutely. And of course, we have laws in this land, which means that regulation is something which we all must adhere to. And I don't think that will be any different when AI is applied.
Phil, thank you for standing in for James. James is back, obviously, next week from his holes. And if you have a really difficult question for him, really, really hard, please, get in touch with us. You can email aihavinaclue@gmail.com. You can comment on any of our social media videos. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and now on YouTube, which is very exciting. Full episodes there. We're going to be putting some video bits and pieces up too. Now, talking of exciting, we have a great guest joining us today, someone who operates across innovation, technology, and intellectual property. a topic which is constantly coming up on this podcast. Carl Rosen is an AI and IP strategy expert at PA Consulting, but he's not your typical strategist. He is a self-described human-centered futurist who walked away from the legal profession the day he got his degree. Now he helps everyone from Fortune 500s to disruptive startups make smaller decisions about innovation using data-driven insights and a fresh take on what IP should be in the AI age. Carl, thank you so much for joining us on AI Having a Clue. Now, I would love to just start by, I guess, setting the scene on you and what you do, because you work with some massive companies and you're dealing kind of at that top level, finding out about, I guess, the things that are keeping the leaders of some of the biggest businesses in the world up at night.
Excellent. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And indeed, I used to be a lawyer, but I left the profession the same day I collected my diploma. Ever since then, I've been working in the field of innovation management and essentially building future-proof businesses. So what we do is that we typically speak to C-suite and ask them those type of questions. And the answer is typically, do we have too much or too little of AI? And how are we to compete with new disruptors in our specific industry? And more importantly, what type of technology do we need to embed into our products and services to make them indeed competitive?
And what is the general consensus, if there is one, on AI? How are leaders feeling about it right now?
So I think the general consensus that we are picking up is that there's a lot of optimism about AI that's human-centric, meaning AI built with a human in the loop, or at least a human control function. But there's also a fear, potentially, of AI in abstraction, what this means for the human element of a business, meaning its employees. What does it mean when a firm all of a sudden don't necessarily need to hire junior people? Because there's AI functions and capabilities that essentially make that junior competence profile obsolete.
Do you see that that kind of entry level aspect where it's kind of wiped out our whole level of jobs? Do you see that as an opportunity for people that are starting their careers to go into businesses and do something different and not have to do kind of the grunt work? Or is it a big issue that we're going to face here, that a whole generation of people kind of can't get into that first level of their jobs?
That's a great question. I think that there are probably more opportunities than risks right now. It just requires a different mindset and potentially also equipping yourself with different types of skills that universities maybe don't necessarily focus on that much right now. But I was very blessed to grow up academically in a context where it was a high priority of the T-shaped individual. And a T-shaped individual is someone with great breadth of different expertise, trades and skills, a multidisciplinary perspective, which you can then connect dots and pick and choose. That's the type of competence profile which allows a person to be more AI resilient, because what you can do is you can supercharge that competence with AI.
I want to ask you about intellectual property, because IP is a very hot topic right now, and I know it's something that you were dealing with a lot. Can you just touch upon about how AI has or is changing intellectual property?
It's quite an interesting topic because there's a dichotomy between the IP of AI and then the AI of IP.
Right.
So what I will talk about now is the three-part ontology of AI, which is the data input, the AI model itself, and the data output. Now, IP is a core component of each of those dimensions. Data input, that's where we have big questions around how do we make training data available for various AI models without disrespecting or infringing upon rights holders' rights. The content producers and copyright holders, coupled with policymakers who are to build some form of equilibrium there. The AI models itself, they struggle with the protection of the invention that goes into building those models. Output is, in this day and age, more of a philosophical frontier, but will become incredibly important because it deals with questions such as who can be an author, who can be an inventor, Does that need to be a human? What does it mean when a machine has generated something of novelty that otherwise would be considered a patentable subject matter or a copyrightable subject matter? That's the IP of AI. Now, AI has fundamentally changed the game of IP, how IP is generated, created, managed, and also used, and ultimately also disputed in court. What is fascinating is that also the legal industry is one of the industries subject to most disruption by AI. So it's kind of like this interesting nexus where everything just converges.
I guess the implications for creators, be that a big business level, whether it's Disney or right down to individual creators, music artists, influencers, whatever it may be. Is it becoming harder to protect IP? And in this landscape where, as you say, anyone can be a creator, has it completely changed the game for how creative is protected? And what needs to be done to look after intellectual property in this day and age?
One needs to go back to first principles. And when it comes to IP is a negative property right, meaning I have a right to exclude others from using something which I have a proprietary claim to. That means that while it may be easy to acquire that degree of protection, using that legal right may be more difficult. And in particular, when, let's say, infringement of that right happens in a black box regime, you don't necessarily know that your content is being used to train an AI model until you start seeing potential derivative work of your work as output from that AI model. I'm thinking about Getty Images, which is this famous example. What is incredibly important to keep in mind there is that as we become more sophisticated in handling these type of potential collisions, we need to create an equilibrium, because it can't be so that an entire business model is predicated upon infringement of others' intellectual property. And I do believe that human ingenuity and human innovation must still be at the center stage here. Even in the age of AI, we must elevate ourselves and our humanity through the use of AI, not undermine it. Although it may be, for some, just a legal policy discussion, it still has those implications. Who are we to prioritize here? The humans or the machines? Without painting a dystopian picture here, but I think that is an important implication in this debate as well. Do we want to undermine our humanity or elevate it? And that may actually be so that it starts with recognizing and acknowledging the human right holder in respect to this complex environment around training data.
We had the minister, the UK minister for AI and digital on the podcast a few weeks ago. And she basically said it is super important that we feed the UK AI sector with great data, i.e. that's the top priority, and actually protecting individual IP falls second to that. Is that something that you agree with, or actually, on your point of protecting humanity, would you say actually looking after the individual creative still takes precedent?
I think we have been in similar situations before. Collective licensing of intellectual property, or the more technical term, multilateral licensing of intellectual property, has happened before. In the music industry, you have various initiatives that aggregate individual rights from individual rights holders to make that available under one single license. So we have, let's say, the legal infrastructure to create something similar. Now, equally important is actually making available the right type of data to train your AI models. And I think that that's increasingly becoming a question about sovereignty, because we have all these repositories of great wisdom and data, which we should make available under some form of license structure where rights holders are indeed incentivized to participate, so that there's alternative for AI developers and AI companies to use ethically sourced data to train their models, and potentially also verified and validated, so that indeed you don't have those nasty side effects of AI hallucinations and other type of, let's say, biases, which can be a side effect of poor quality data.
I'm going to throw a bit of a hypothetical situation to you, because I'm so interested in you're working with some of the biggest companies in the world. You're advising on the future. You're advising in this space as well, in particular about IP. Let's say you're working with NBC Universal. Let's say they're saying we're looking to protect the creator of Shrek in this modern AI world. What can they do? What would you advise that they do in terms of making sure that their IP is protected? Or actually, is it at a stage right now with AI where there is very little that can be done?
Well, the first question is to define what their IP is in that context. It could be a set of trademarks and brand-related assets, could be also the way of producing certain content, could also be, of course, the content itself. AI in the creative industry is a tool which probably should be embedded in the creation process, requiring human input and indeed human ingenuity. The output can be indeed protected through other means than just intellectual property, because that's what IP and intellectual property needs to be considered as a control mechanism. There are many ways of establishing control in a market or even creating new markets through control positions. One way is being first. Still to this day, I say, let's hop in an Uber. And then I realize I have ordered some type of other ride sharing.
You're in a Bolt.
Car. That is a pretty important control position, and therefore also to be considered some form of IP. In this case, I think we have these blurring lines between human creation and machine creation. And what could end up happening is that we move from scarcity of creations to an abundance of creations. And we haven't really been there before. In the world of AI, it's not going to be serendipity that generates novelty in creations of worthy of IP protection. It's a very data-driven, logic-bound process. But I think they complement one another. And I think that a company like Universal clearly need to embed a certain way of working with AI, but equally a way to find new ways of building, what would you say, growth platforms upon their brands and IP positions that they have. And that often means that they have to go into the digital realm, spanning the physical and the digital. So something we say is that we work in the phygital. What really determines whether you are a product company or a platform company is the quality of your IP, because the platform requires a certain degree of longevity. Otherwise, you can't really build a platform. And that longevity is a consequence of your control position. It's something that allows you to do this and someone else can't.
You're working a lot on predicting future trends. What should we be looking out for?
What we need to be looking out for is this idea around how disruptive AI will be in the short term vis-a-vis the long term. We typically say that the short-term implications of AI are overestimated, and the long-term implications are currently underestimated. Just look at the new companies emerging, the problems that they are solving, and the new pockets of economic growth that they are unlocking. On the other side, as the economy is shifting, we are moving towards an environment where certain labor and certain skills are less needed. And that's going to have huge societal impact. And we need to be prepared to have, on a policy level, pretty tough and frank discussions around what that means, and also what the role of universities is in that context. As we accelerate in this AI development, AI integration and economy, we are not to lose track on our humanity, because we are building AI to serve human and human purpose. And that's key. So one thing which we constantly do when we encourage leaders to press go and charge ahead when it comes to AI integration and adoption and development is that we constantly make sure that it serves the company's greater good and also its community's greater good. I think we are otherwise heading into a, let's say, situation where we pretty quickly will have to face rather existential questions and predicaments.
Well, on that bombshell, a massive thank you to Carl. What a thought-provoking conversation, and it's so interesting to kind of peel back those layers of how AI is challenging not just industries but legal and educational and creative systems too. Carl, thank you so much for joining us. So Phil, thank you so much for joining us on AI Having a Clue this week.
My pleasure,
Stepping to James. Will you come back?
If you'll have me back, of course.
I mean, next week. sorry, James. So what happened? We take a week off? No, it's been. We really appreciated you coming in and being our guest AI expert. And of course, if anyone wants to hear more from Phil, his LinkedIn is a brilliant place full of amazing advice, and the brilliant new travel report can be found there as well. But that is all we've got time for this week on AI Having a Clue. Thank you so much again to Phil and, of course, to Carl for joining us. And thank you for listening. If you've been using AI in doing something interesting, if you've got a weird story or a really, really, really hard question for James when he's back next week to answer, do drop us an email at aihavingaclue@gmail.com. You can also find us at Substack, where we are giving you a whole load of brilliant AI insight, and find us across social media. Do please subscribe, rate us, and share the podcast with a friend or strangers that you come across on the street. We don't mind. But for now, I'll say thank you to Team AI Having a Clue, and we'll catch you next time. And Phil, remember,
stay curious.